December 16th, 1944, 5:30 a.m., the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Darkness still clings to the snow-laden pines. A bitter wind cuts through the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine resin and frozen earth. Then, without warning, the world explodes. A thunderous barrage erupts along a 70-mile front. Thousands of German guns, hidden for weeks in the dense woods, unleash hell. Shells whistle overhead, bursting in blinding flashes that light up the white landscape like deadly fireworks. Trees splinter, foxholes collapse. American soldiers, many still asleep in their thin overcoats, scramble into the chaos. In the dim dawn light, massive shapes emerge from the mist. Tiger and Panther tanks, their engines roaring, tracks churning through the snow. Behind them, waves of gray-uniformed infantry advance, some wearing white camouflage, others shouting commands in guttural tones. The men of the U.S. 28th and 106th Infantry Divisions, holding this quiet sector for rest and refit, reel under the onslaught. Outposts fall one by one. Radios crackle with desperate pleas. Heavy enemy armor, infantry and strength, we're pulling back. Roads jam with retreating vehicles, jeeps, trucks, half-tracks sliding on ice. Prisoners are herded eastward in long columns, heads bowed against the cold. Farther north, at the vital crossroads of Bastogne, trucks rumble into town under cover of night. The 101st Airborne Division, rushed from reserve in France, disgorges tough paratroopers in jump boots and wool scarves. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe watches them deploy into the surrounding fields and villages, digging hasty positions in the iron-hard ground as the first distant booms echo from the east. 100 miles south, in the Saar region, Lieutenant General George C. Patton's Third Army grinds forward against stubborn German defenses. His Sherman tanks push through mud and minefields, infantry clearing fortified villages yard by yard. Patton, ever restless, pores over maps in his Nancy headquarters, sensing something amiss in the quiet Ardennes. He has suspected it for weeks. Intelligence reports of unusual rail traffic, radio blackouts, fuel stockpiles. Most dismiss the idea. A major German attack here, in winter, through impossible terrain? Absurd. But Patton prepares anyway. In secret sessions, his staff drafts contingency plans, routes north, supply shifts, division pivots, maps marked with bold arrows. He waits for the call. It comes on December 18. By then, the German salient, the Bulge, has torn 50 miles deep into Allied lines. Bastogne is nearly encircled. December 19, Verdun, France. A squat stone barracks, once a French army school, now Bradley's headquarters. The room is frigid, heated only by a sputtering stove. Cigarette smoke hangs heavy. Eisenhower stands over the situation map, face drawn, as aides pin red arrows showing the enemy's relentless advance. Generals gather, Bradley, grim, Devers from the south, Patton, arriving last, boots muddy from the drive. The mood is tense, losses mounting, divisions shattered, Bastogne hanging by a thread. Eisenhower demands a counterattack. But when? Weeks, some murmur. Roads iced over, men exhausted. Patton breaks the silence. I can attack with 3 divisions the morning of the 22nd. Disbelief ripples through the room. His army faces east, a 90-degree turn in this weather, with supply lines stretched. Eisenhower leans in. George, that's ambitious. Patton's gaze is steel. I've already started the movement. The impossible has begun. And in Bastogne, as shells rain down and ammunition low, the screaming eagles dig deeper, praying for a miracle that is already racing north through the storm. The stove in the corner of the Verdun barracks hissed and popped, throwing faint orange light across the faces of the men gathered around the map table. Outside, a steady drizzle mixed with sleet tapped against the blackened windows. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wet greatcoats, strong coffee, and the sharp bite of tension. Dwight Eisenhower rubbed the bridge of his nose, eyes fixed on the bulging red salient that now dominated the map of Belgium. 50 miles deep in places, entire American divisions missing or in retreat, and at the center of it all, Bastogne, 7 roads converging on a small market town, now almost completely surrounded. Omar Bradley spoke first, voice measured but heavy. We need a counterattack from the south, but realistically, Ike, it's going to take time. Third Army is engaged east of the Moselle. Roads are a mess, fuel's tight. We're looking at early January before we can hit with real strength. Nods around the table. Jacob Devers, commanding 6th Army Group farther south, agreed. The weather was grounding the air forces. Supply lines were stretched thin. No one wanted to throw half-ready divisions into the meat grinder. Then George Patton leaned forward. His face was calm, almost serene, but his eyes burned with that familiar intensity. "Hell, gentlemen," he said, voice low and deliberate. "The Third Army will attack on the morning of December 22nd with 3 divisions." A beat of silence. Then the room stirred. Eyebrows raised, a few stifled coughs. Someone shifted in their chair. Bradley turned to him. "George, your front is facing east. You'd have to disengage, swing 90 degrees north, move over 100 miles of secondary roads in this weather, refuel, and be ready to attack in 48 hours from this meeting," Patton finished. "Yes, that's correct." Eisenhower straightened, studying his old friend closely. He knew Patton's flair for the dramatic, but this bordered on fantasy. "You're serious?" "Dead serious, Ike. Orders are already cut. My corps commanders have their instructions. The lead divisions are pulling out tonight." The Supreme Commander glanced at his Chief of Staff, Bedell Smith, who gave a subtle shake of the head. This was madness. But Eisenhower had learned long ago not to bet against Patton when he spoke with that quiet certainty. "Show me," Eisenhower said, gesturing to the map. Patton stepped forward, pointer in hand. With swift, confident strokes, he traced the routes. 20th Corps under Walker, disengaging from the Saar, swinging northwest. 12th Corps under Eddy, following. 3rd Corps under Milliken in reserve. Fuel dumps already repositioned. Bridges reconnoitered. Traffic control points established. He spoke like a man describing a maneuver he had rehearsed in his mind 100 times. And he had. For weeks, Patton's intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, had been warning of a buildup opposite the Ardennes. Most dismissed it. Hitler had no reserves left for a major offensive. But Patton trusted Koch's instincts. Quietly, without fanfare, he had ordered his staff to wargame exactly this scenario. A German thrust through the Ardennes, Bastogne threatened, Third Army ordered north. The plans were ready, the maps marked, the timetables calculated. Now the moment had arrived. Eisenhower exhaled slowly. "If you can pull this off, George, it'll be one hell of a Christmas present for the American people." Patton allowed himself a thin smile. "It'll be a Christmas present for the Germans, too, Ike, just not the kind they're expecting." The meeting broke soon after. Patton climbed into his jeep and roared back toward Nancy through the freezing rain, mind already racing ahead to the columns that would soon be moving north. Behind him, the other generals lingered, still shaking their heads. Impossible. But as the hours ticked by, reports began filtering into Schaeff. Third Army units seemed turning north, convoys stretching for miles, tanks rolling through villages under blackout lights. The great wheel had begun to turn. And in the snow-choked fields around Bastogne, the men of the 101st listened to the distant thunder of artillery growing closer, wondering how much longer they could hold. Night falls over eastern France on December 19, black and moonless, the sky heavy with low clouds that promise more snow. But along the secondary road stretching from the Saar toward Luxembourg, a river of steel begins to flow north. Headlights dimmed to slits, thousands of vehicles crawl forward in endless columns, olive-drab trucks packed with infantry huddled under blankets, half-tracks towing 105mm howitzers, Sherman tanks grinding along on frozen tracks. Exhaust clouds hang in the frigid air like ghosts. Military police in white scarves stand at every crossroads, waving torches to keep the streams moving. This is no ordinary redeployment. This is an entire army, over 250,000 men, 133,000 vehicles, entire corps, executing a 90-degree pivot in the dead of winter while still fighting a disengagement battle to their rear. Major General Hugh Gaffey, commanding the 4th Armored Division, stands beside his command half-track near Longwy, watching the columns pass. His division has been chosen as the spearhead. They must cover more than 100 miles, refuel, reorganize, and attack, all within days. Gaffey's face is gaunt from lack of sleep, but his voice carries calm authority as he speaks into the radio. "Keep them rolling. No stops longer than 10 minutes. Bastogne can't wait." Behind the armor come the infantry divisions, 26th, 80th, 35th, men who only hours ago were assaulting the Siegfried Line, now climbing aboard trucks for a freezing ride north. Engineers work through the night laying steel treadway bridges over swollen streams, clearing ice from narrow passes. Quartermasters hustle fuel bowsers forward, calculating every gallon against the bitter cold that thickens oil and drains batteries. At 3rd Army Headquarters in Nancy, the operations room hums with controlled frenzy. Phones ring constantly. Teletype machines clatter. Colonel Oscar Koch, Patton's intelligence chief, pins fresh overlays showing German positions around Bastogne. The ring is tightening. Panzer divisions press from east and west. Ammunition in the town is down to days, rations to less. Patton himself prowls the map tables like a caged lion, barking questions, demanding updates. He has not slept in 2 days. His staff know better than to offer excuses. When a logistics officer reports a traffic jam near Arlon, Patton's reply is short and sharp: "Untangle it, or I'll come untangle it myself."
By dawn on December 20th, the scale of the movement becomes clear to Allied command. Aerial reconnaissance, when the weather briefly clears, spots the massive columns snaking north. Reports flood in to Schaeff. Third Army is actually doing it. Divisions that were facing the Saar are now streaming toward the southern shoulder of the Bulge.
In the frozen perimeter around Bastogne, the men of the 101st and attached armored units feel the noose tightening. German loudspeakers blare surrender demands across the snowfields. Shellfire is constant, airbursts shredding the bare trees. Medics work in cellars lit by flickering lanterns, operating on wounded by flashlight. General McAuliffe walks the lines, helmet pushed back, encouraging his paratroopers with quiet words and the occasional grim joke. They have been told help is coming from the south, but days crawl by, Christmas approaches, and still the horizon remains silent. Then, on December 22, as Patton promised, the first attacks go in. 3rd Corps hits near Wiltz, probing for weak points. 12th Corps lunges toward the Sour River. But the main effort, the drive to Bastogne, falls to Gaffey's 4th Armored. Combat Command A under Colonel Wendell Blanchard and Combat Command B under Colonel Creighton Abrams push north through blinding snowstorms, roads slick with ice, bridges blown. German rearguards fight fiercely, 88mm guns hidden in woods, Panther tanks hull down on ridges. Every village becomes a battlefield, Neufchâteau, Martelange, Warnac. Casualties mount, tanks skid into ditches, men freeze at their posts, yet the columns keep moving. And far to the rear, at Schaeff headquarters, fresh pins appear on the big map, blue arrows creeping north faster than anyone thought possible. Eisenhower watches them advance, hour by hour. He begins to believe, but Bastogne is still holding by its fingernails, and the weather is closing in again. Christmas Eve, 1944. The Ardennes is locked in a vise of ice and fog. Along the narrow road from Arlon to Bastogne, the tanks of the 4th Armored Division crawl forward like a steel serpent, engines straining against the cold. Snowdrifts pile high on the verges. In places, the route is barely wider than a single vehicle. Every bridge is a potential death trap, mined, demolished, or covered by hidden guns. Leading the Western Column is Combat Command Reserve under Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, future namesake of the mighty tank that will bear his name. His Shermans, whitewashed for camouflage, push through the village of Chaumont, where German paratroopers of the 5th Fallschirmjäger Division fight from cellars and attics. House-to-house fighting erupts in the freezing dusk. Flamethrower teams clear strongpoints. Medics drag wounded into sheltered doorways, while tracers stitch red lines across the sky. To the east, Combat Command A under Colonel Wendell Blanchard grinds toward Bigonville. The terrain here is worse, rolling hills, deep gullies, forests thick with underbrush. German 88s bark from concealed positions, knocking out lead tanks in sheets of flame. Crews bail out into snowbanks, some burning, some frozen where they fall. Yet the advance never stops. Abrams, voice calm over the radio net, urges his commanders forward. Keep moving. Don't bunch up. Bastogne is only 12 miles ahead. The men inside the tanks feel the cold seep through steel plate, turret hatches iced shut, breath fogging instruments, fingers numb on triggers.
but they know what is at stake. Radio intercepts speak of Baston's dwindling supplies, of wounded piling up in makeshift hospitals, of McAuliffe's defiant nuts to the German surrender demand on December 22nd. That single word has already become legend across the front. On Christmas Day, the weather briefly lifts. For a few precious hours, P-47 Thunderbolts of the 19th Tactical Air Command roar overhead, diving through broken cloud to strafe German columns and drop desperately needed supplies to the besieged town. Parachutes blossom like white flowers against the gray sky. The sight lifts every heart along the corridor. But by evening, the fog rolls back in, thick as cotton. Air support vanishes again. The ground war resumes its grim, personal scale. The key now is the village of Eisenhower, only 3 miles south of Bastogne. It sits astride the last ridge before the town, held by elements of the Panzer Division and reinforced infantry. Barbed wire, mines, anti-tank guns in depth. Abrams decides on a bold stroke. At 14:45 hours on December 26th, after a thunderous artillery preparation from every gun the 4th Armored can bring to bear, Company C, 37th Tank Battalion, led by Captain William Dwight, charges straight down the main road into Eisenhower at full speed. Behind them comes the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion in half-tracks. The Germans are caught off guard by the audacity. Tanks crash through roadblocks. Machine guns streak the streets. Dwight's lead Sherman, named Cobra King, takes a hit but keeps rolling, main gun blazing. Infantry leap down and clear houses room by room. In 20 brutal minutes, Eisenhower falls. Beyond the village, the ground opens toward Bastogne. 4 tanks and a half-track push on alone, racing the last mile and a half under sporadic fire. At 16:50 hours, Lieutenant Charles Bogus, commanding the lead Sherman, crests a slight rise and sees American foxholes ahead. He fires a single round into the air. From the tree line, a figure in a ragged overcoat rises, waving wildly. A paratrooper of the 101st. The corridor is open. Cheers erupt along the line. Men who have not smiled in weeks embrace in the snow. Medics rush forward with plasma and morphine. Supply trucks begin rolling in under the fading light. In Bastogne, McAuliffe receives the news by radio. His voice, for once, betrays emotion. Back at 3rd Army headquarters, Patton allows himself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. But the greatest reaction comes hundreds of miles away at Schaeff. Eisenhower stands before the great situation map, watching aides move the blue pins northward hour by hour. Then, late on the 26th, the final positions are plotted. The Supreme Commander stares for a long moment. "Good God," he murmurs, almost to himself. "He's already there." The room falls silent. Patton has done the impossible. But the battle is far from over, and the Germans are about to throw everything they have left to close the corridor again.
Abrams decides on a bold stroke. December 27th, 1944. Dawn breaks pale and cold over the newly opened corridor south of Bastogne. The road from Eisenhower into the town is a lifeline now, narrow, exposed, churned to slush by endless tracks and boots. Supply trucks inch forward under Red Cross flags, loaded with ammunition, plasma, K-rations, and mail from home. Medics evacuate the worst of the wounded on the return trip, stretchers lashed to jeep hoods, faces gray with frost and pain. But the Germans are far from finished. Field Marshal von Rundstedt and General Manteuffel know Bastion's value. As long as the Americans hold it, the southern shoulder of the bulge remains firm. Orders fly from Hitler's headquarters: close the corridor, retake the town, restore the offensive. From three sides, fresh attacks slam into the thin American salient. Panzer-Lehr Division, bloodied but still potent, surges back toward Eisenhower with panzer tanks and grenadiers. The 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler shifts west from the north. From the east, the Führerbegleitbrigade, Hitler's personal escort unit, equipped with the newest Tigers, lunges toward the road. The fighting becomes savage, intimate, unrelenting. In the village of Clochemont, just west of the corridor, Creighton Abrams Combat Command B digs in along a low ridge. Shermans haul down in snowbanks, trade shots with advancing Panthers at point-blank range. The air fills with the clang of ricochets, the roar of 75mm guns, the screams of wounded. Trees burst into flame from tracer rounds. Black smoke coils skyward. Abrams moves from tank to tank, calm under fire, directing fire missions by radio. When a Panther knocks out 3 of his Shermans in quick succession, he calls in artillery, 155mm long toms from the 193rd Field Artillery Battalion, walking the shells dangerously close to his own positions. The ridge shakes, German infantry scatter. The attack falters. Farther north, elements of the 35th Infantry Division and 6th Armored Division extend the corridor, fighting through Hemrul and Champ against determined Fallschirmjäger. Every hedgerow hides a machine gun nest, every orchard an anti-tank gun. The weather remains the Germans' last ally. Low cloud and snow squalls ground Allied aircraft for days at a time. When brief windows open, thunderbolts and typhoons scream down, rockets ripping into panzer columns. But the ground troops bear the brunt alone. Inside Bastogne, the relief brings no respite. McAuliffe's paratroopers, reinforced now by armored infantry, launch local counterattacks to widen the perimeter. Glider riders of the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment push out toward the southwest, linking solidly with the 4th Armored. The town itself remains under constant shelling, 155mm and 210mm rounds cratering streets, collapsing buildings, burying men alive. Yet morale soars. Men who expected to spend Christmas as prisoners now unwrap frozen candy bars and read letters from home. Chaplains hold services in ruined cellars. Someone finds a battered harmonica. For a few hours, the sound of silent night drifts through the rubble. At 3rd Army Headquarters, Patton receives the latest reports with grim satisfaction. The corridor is open, but only a few hundred yards wide in places. He knows the Germans will throw everything into closing it. Reinforcements pour north, the 11th Armored Division, the 87th Infantry Division. He plans the next phase, widening the breach, then driving east to collapse the entire southern flank of the bulge. At Schaeff, Eisenhower and Bradley watch the map with growing confidence. The German timetable has slipped. Fuel shortages bite deeper. Reserves dwindle. Patton's audacious march has not only saved Bastogne, it has seized the initiative. But the cost is staggering. Frozen bodies line the roadsides. Burned-out tanks litter the fields. Hospitals overflow. Every yard of ground is paid for in blood. And still the Germans come on, wave after desperate wave. As New Year's Eve approaches, the corridor holds, barely. One more massive assault is gathering in the snow-choked forests to the east. If it succeeds, Bastogne will be cut off again. If it fails, the bulge itself may break. January 3rd, 1945. The Ardennes sky finally clears, a hard, brilliant blue after weeks of smothering gray. For the first time since the offensive began, Allied air power unleashes its full fury. Waves of P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings sweep over the bulge, hunting anything that moves. German supply columns caught on open roads are torn apart by rockets and .50 caliber fire. Fuel tankers erupt in towering fireballs. Horse-drawn artillery wagons scatter in panic. The Luftwaffe, starved of fuel and pilots, barely contests the skies. On the ground, the tide has turned. Patton's Third Army, now fully committed along the southern shoulder, drives east and northeast with relentless pressure. The 4th Armored Division, reinforced and resupplied, pushes beyond Bastogne toward Houffalize, linking up with elements of Hodges' First Army coming down from the north. The corridor widens into a broad salient of its own. German units, cut off and short of everything, begin surrendering in droves. Gray-faced men stumbling out of the woods with hands raised. In the forests east of Bastogne, the last major German assault collapses. The Führer-Begleit Brigade, thrown into a desperate night attack on New Year's Eve, reaches the edge of the American positions, only to be shattered by massed artillery and tank fire in the dawn light. Burning tigers litter the snowfields. Survivors pull back in disorder. Field Marshal Montgomery's forces in the north, bolstered by fresh British and American divisions, begin their own deliberate advance. The pincers close. By mid-January, the bulge is no more, a flattened scar on the map. The Germans have lost over 100,000 men, hundreds of tanks, and irreplaceable reserves. Their last strategic fuel stocks are gone. The Western Front, briefly ruptured, is sealed tighter than ever. At Third Army headquarters, Patton receives the final victory reports with characteristic bluntness. "Fine work," he tells his staff. "Now let's cross the Rhine and finish this damned war." He has already turned his attention eastward, planning the next leap toward Germany itself. In Bastogne, the scars remain deep. The town is a ruin, roofs collapsed, walls pockmarked, streets choked with rubble. But the defenders emerge into the January sunlight unbowed. The 101st Airborne marches out in good order, bound for new battles, their siege a permanent part of American lore. At Schaeff, Eisenhower reflects on the campaign that almost broke the Allied effort in Europe. The German gamble came closer than most will ever admit. Yet one decision at a cold table in Verdun on December 19 changed everything. Patton's lightning march, executed against every objection, saved Bastogne, blunted the offensive, and seized the initiative for good. It stands as one of the war's great feats of arms, a masterpiece of foresight, logistics, and raw audacity. Years later, historians will argue over details, who planned what, who deserves the most credit. But in the moment, in the stunned silence of that headquarters room on December 26th, one quiet exclamation said it all.
Eisenhower, staring at the map as blue arrows reached positions no one thought possible, spoke for every soldier who had lived through the frozen hell of the Ardennes. "Good God," he whispered in memory, "he's already there." The bulge was over. The road to victory lay open.